Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to hear, you know, Mr. Speaker, before I begin my presentation, I need to make just a couple points on the operation of our Parliament. And of course, as Father of the House, which you recognize, Mr. Speaker, it's important for me to point out how I believe we should be operating, and of course, if there are some areas of difficulties, then I need to point that out accordingly, with no hard feelings. Speaker, I'm glad that you talked about the opening bat, because the game was, they had 15 batsmen in this match, and of course, one spoke, one batted, and unfortunately, I got the impression your statement, you say the game was over from what you said last Monday. But remember, you have the one young batsman. If you remember the Rohan Kanais and Viv Richards, that was the key positions. And they really set the platform for the innings alive. So I would do that precisely, Mr. Speaker. But I also want to point out, Mr. Speaker, on a more serious note, that when we completed the presentation of the budget by the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, we were not presented with any document about the speech, whether it's hard copy, soft copy. It was only about late afternoon that, after queries, that we received a copy. Mr. Speaker, I beg your indulgence, because the sun is hitting straight into it, making it extremely uncomfortable. So will I get some help to move it? I can't continue like this. That's too bad. It's still.
If there is a mic that you want to use away from where you're standing, because I'm not sure what can be done.
That is the sun.
Yeah.
Maybe I should go.
So if it's okay, honorable leader of the opposition, you can just use another mic. Move to the end.
Yes.
If you're comfortable there, where you miss the lectern.
You have to move the lectern. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Bring that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your cooperation. Yes, I was pointing out that we had no document, and having been in this Parliament for 38 years, Mr. Speaker, with several budget presentations, this is the first time that the document, the budget presentation, was not made available to members of the House, whether it's soft copy or hard copy. I heard a lot of talk about technology and so on. And we will talk a lot about technology today, to see who is involved in technological advancement in this country. Mr. Speaker, it would be nice to hear that we begin the debate this morning and the leader of the opposition leads. That's a normal announcement that is done, historically so, to start the debate, and the time allocated, and not only for the leader of the opposition, for every other member of the House. They should know precisely this. So I just wanted to make this point, Mr. Speaker, for what it's worth, so that we do not have a difficulty in the future, Mr. Speaker. I think I owe it to the Honorable House, as I said, without any malice whatsoever. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance began his budget presentation, in my view, with a scurrilous attack on the past government, deviating, in my view, and the record will show, from the budget presentations of over the past several parliaments that I have been involved with. And one could just look at the opening statements and you see exactly what I was talking about. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance was basically saying that the past two NDC governments, 1990 to 1995, and 2008 to 2013, did nothing whatsoever. He dismissed all governments since 1983 in his own statement that no serious development took place since 1983. So it appears, Mr. Speaker, the Messiah is now here. And the Messiah will now do all that's supposed to be done for Grenada, Carriacou, and Peter Martinique, with all governments, including his own NDC government that he has adopted. So I make this point for what it's worth, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this budget was anchored under the theme Vision 2035, People-Centered Transformation, laying the foundation for resilience, empowerment, and growth. The notion, Mr. Speaker, that the central idea suggests there has been no foundation that supports resilience, empowerment, and growth in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, and that this budget intends to create the same. In my view, Mr. Speaker, this statement is absolutely flawed. It might suit the ego of the Minister of Finance, but it's certainly flawed, that statement. And I will demonstrate throughout this presentation how flawed it has been. Mr. Speaker, the budget was filled with political attacks. The first time I've seen a budget of this nature. Politics may have been not a bad statement for a political platform, but not for the budget presentation. It was filled with deception, intellectual dishonesty, and some fundamental basic errors, which I, Mr. Speaker, will detail step by step. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind the Minister of Finance, maybe some of his colleagues, I don't know if all, that Grenada did not start on the 24th of June, its development, 24th of June 2022. Therefore, it is important that this government need to recognize the foundation that were afforded it. Understand the struggles that generations before them have endured to build it. And embrace the opportunity. This would be the right approach. Embrace the opportunity to strengthen and improve it, because there will always be room for improvement. As the absence of this recognition and understanding would lead to their own unraveling and foundation. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore fitting and in my view, absolutely necessary that I commence my response to the 2023 budget presentation with a reminder to those who may have forgotten, intentionally or otherwise, and inform those in the nation who did not experience the period during which the new National Party administration laid the foundation that they want to ignore, that supported resilience, growth, and empowerment in this country. Mr. Speaker, it is an established fact that no business, no enterprise, including government and probably more importantly government, can flourish without a proper infrastructure in place. So fundamental, Mr. Speaker. Nothing serious was done since 1983. It's amazing, Mr. Speaker. Let me remind, through you, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance and his team, I said those who believe in those statements. During the period 1986 to 1989, the new National Party administration undertook an ambitious rural electrification program that increased the percentage of homes with electricity from 45% to 98% in just 4 years, Mr. Speaker. Talking about foundation, that is transformation. In fact, it's done the Minister of Finance some good to complement that, and he's taken to another stage. Without this, Mr. Speaker, half of Grenada would have been in the dark ages. And we know what electricity means to all aspects of development, including education of our children and the health of our nation. The effect of this, Mr. Speaker, was staggering. Mr. Speaker, refrigerators and other electrical appliances were sold out. Economic activities, some may be too young to know, Mr. Speaker. That's why it's important for the father of the house to speak. I can't say the malicious, I just have to say they may not have known, because some of them were maybe little children when all these were happening and laying the foundation for what they are today. Private home construction increased. Micro businesses took root, Mr. Speaker. Students had a comfortable studying environment, which resulted in improved grades in their school activities. And all of this, Mr. Speaker, occurred when the utility was owned by the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. Mr. Speaker, as I said, the history is important. That those who do not know the history may repeat some fundamental errors. And therefore, if this government is serious, he would listen to the history that I will give in some cases. Mr. Speaker, in the colonial period, before the revolution took over, the electricity company was owned by a company called Colonial Development Corporation. The name is very, very important. Colonial Development Corporation. That was prior to 1979. With only a minute part of the population had electricity. Unless you had connections or you had a big house or something, some area, you don't get electricity. The PRG, rightly so, acquired that company. And literally, they paid literally almost nothing. I heard it was just $1. Because of the state of the company under CDC, not Grenadians, CDC. In 1984, therefore, when the NNP took over, I happened to then be the Minister of Works and Public Utilities and Transport. When we recognized the seriousness of what was taking place in the country and the rightful decision of the PRG, we did a survey of what was happening in the country. That's how we found out. Scientific survey, Mr. Speaker, and realized that we're in a bad state. So we decided that we had to put electricity throughout the country. In fact, the Minister of Electricity did not have electricity at the time. So in my little village, it was in the main street, and those of us in the back. Okay. Then, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we decided to do some data collection, because as a person of science, I don't just vote, Mr. Speaker. We do things analysis, and the government then under Prime Minister Blaise supported it. So we did an analysis, and we rated villages of importance in terms of the characteristics. Don't need to go into all the characteristics. Who should get number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's how we started it. You know which village came up number 1 in terms of the criteria? Munich in St. Andrews, Mr. Speaker. So Munich was the first village in the country. Know your history. Was the first village to receive electricity services under this massive, ambitious, and revolutionary process of electrification in the country. Munich got electricity. You know, years after, those of you who remember, they had what, Village of Lights in Munich. Every anniversary there was celebration. I didn't used to miss it because roti for so, food for so. I won't talk about the other things over there. But, so the country moved, Mr. Speaker, and we did, in fact, had some major decisions then. Mr. Speaker, in 1994, of course, elections was held in 1990, and the government, a combination government of TNP, and NDC formed government. Mr. Speaker, unwittingly, they decided that they must privatize Grenlec. And it's the decision of privatization is not the issue. Because you can privatize, you can commercialize, and knowing the conditions on which it's done, if it's transparent and it's done in the interests of the people, then that's not a problem. So I'm not here knocking privatization. I hear the word coming up again, but I'm waiting. The company was sold in 1994 for 15 million EC dollars, Mrs. Speaker. That company that now had 98% of the country covered with electricity, Mr. Speaker. All the poles were bought by the Grenlec. The history of Grenada says we owe the workers of that company. Some of them are passed on to the great beyond. Well-known man called Barrel and a team of men. They work night and day, Mr. Speaker, bringing electricity. The company was sold, Mr. Speaker. I went to Parliament the time the purchase agreement was being discussed and opposed it. And as a person of science and a person involved in statistical work, we analyzed it. One Dr. Raphael Fletcher was also involved, and a number of other persons. And we scrutinized the formula for charge of electricity, and we said it was unfair to the people of the country. Despite all the advice we gave, the government went ahead and sold it. $15 million, Mr. Speaker. for the company. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, they gave back the company $5 million to buy a generator. What? I mean, that's manje popot. They gave back this great NDC government then. They gave back $5 million to buy generator. The workers' benefits were not included in the set, so $3 million of that had to be put aside for the workers at Granley pension fund or something like this. There were $2 million for other commitments, so the country must have got about $5-6 million for it. That it was had. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot more to be said about what happened during this time. The Minister of Finance comes in here and says, we had a hatred, or I can't remember the word. We had a problem with the people, the owners, the persons running the company. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance should not judge me in his own colors. I would be very critical of a decision. I am critical of any actions of previous governments, but I hold no any portfolio as far as that is concerned. We come to Parliament, we debate, we speak, we say things to get each other to change our minds, but there's no malice in me. Who has malice? Who has malice? Let the cap fit, but have no malice. He says that we had against the company. I was only interested in one thing: the fairness of the deal. The fairness of the deal for the country, not for me. In fact, politically those days might have been better just to stay quiet, because some of our own supporters were not happy. They felt they bought the line the government was giving. So politically it was not in our interest. But my conscience did not allow me to sit there scientifically and otherwise to advance the theory that something is fundamentally wrong with this deal. But what was worse, Mr. Speaker, I asked the members on this side of the House, the other side, go check the Parliament. Go check that share purchase agreement that went to Parliament. Don't believe me? Don't take my word. Don't take my word. You go and read, assuming you can read. I can only assume that, and I believe that. I believe. You don't have to believe me. I hear, don't believe. I said, don't believe me, but you have a responsibility to go and check facts. And if you refuse to do that, then you're abdicating a fundamental responsibility for being in this house. So go and read it. You know what they did? It's the Speaker. Utility Commission. The powers of the Utility Commission to examine any request for rates and to manage what the company was doing. Nawasa, which was a government-owned company, the Central Water Commission, had a utility commission, the same utility commission. But they removed the powers of the utility commission to look at rates and to manage a company. Because in the agreement, there were several clauses that says, if you touch one thing, then buy back. That is the state. And the Minister of Finance, a Grenadian, comes in this house, Mr. Speaker, and defends this. Defends it and say, we were the problem. Because we hate some persons. Mr. Speaker, my mother taught me that hate does one thing to you. It upsets your system. It causes a lot of health problems. The body. And she always says, she reaches the age because she does not hate people. She might get upset, but she forgets it overnight. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot more I could say about this arrangement, but I'm aware that I have time constraints. There will be further debate, I assume, and maybe when the bill is being presented, maybe I will then speak to that aspect of it so the countries can hear more as to what has happened. Mr. Speaker, I'm still on the issue of the foundation that were not done, and it's only now a government is building a foundation. Mr. Speaker, the water connectivity that brought pipe-borne water in most of the homes and businesses in Grenada was similarly addressed during that time, Mr. Speaker. The leak detection program, the metering program, which replaced the rate charges with metered building, consumers paying for what they use, was first brought in when I was then the Minister of Public Utilities. Mr. Speaker, you know what rates were being charged? For the charge rate then, Mr. Speaker? If you have a house, that's when I returned home from Washington and became minister, I was amazed. Rates for consumers were charged. If you have a house and you have 6 rooms, you pay for the amount of rooms you have. There was no, in other words, you could use 2 gallons of water, but you're paying for it. But if I have a old dingy, I have one, a lot of us grew up in that. I have a pipe and I turn it on for the whole day, I hardly pay anything. 2 things caused major problems at the time, Mr. Speaker. One, the WASA was not able to have the resources because we did not pay for what we used. The second thing, Mr. Speaker, we are encouraging our own people to be irresponsible. And so for when I got the cabinet to support the decision that we must move to metering, I remember a newspaper headline, well, NNP dead now. The minister put the foot in his mouth. Mr. Speaker, in other words, when you're in leadership, Mr. Speaker, you have to have fortitude. You don't play to the gallery just to get cheap votes. Sometimes you have to take licks. Sometimes you have to be defeated and go on the opposition bench to face another whistle, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes that is necessary. But your conscience would always set you free, Mr. Speaker. Within a year to 1.5 years, the same newspaper came out praising the decision of the then government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, therefore we believe that water and electricity for people are necessary commodities that the Minister of Finance must understand to propel resilience, growth, and empowerment. And they are therefore key foundational elements that existed before this administration came in the government. As part of that foundation, Mr. Speaker, the NNP administration reduced the bureaucracies in the public service and expanded opportunities for people to organize micro and small businesses. Speaker, this is significant because I will talk more later on the public service and the public sector. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Works, I remember those days. We used to hire men and women and pay them by the day, 8 to 4. I was like, 8 to 4. Then California go have fun this character, 8 to 4. On the road in the hot sun. They pay them, daily paid. We purchase the materials, Mr. Speaker. We pay them daily. You know what happened, Mr. Speaker? Days pass. A project estimated to last 2 months, sometimes will take 6. Material left on the site disappear and had to be replaced. And equipment maintenance was a nightmare, both in repair cost and availability. The story I give Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Works sent 100 bags of cement to a particular project. I wouldn't call village because I don't want anybody to feel that I'm accusing them. 3 loads of sand were brought, all the other materials, gravel, and we had 11 men and women. So, as Minister of Works agreeing, so I said, I want to go and see how much work after 3 weeks was done. So, Speaker, but when I went there, those days didn't have much vehicle in those roads. When I went there, I see a little piece of work done after 3 weeks. So I said, where's the material? No material, cement gone. They say they come one day, the cement disappear. Gravel disappear, sand disappear. So Speaker, I said, now if we continue like this, and that was historic over the years. So if we continue like this, we'll never have development in this country. But to take that and to move into contract was a problem. So but we did, Mr. Speaker. We did, Mr. Speaker. We changed our process by offering the same persons, the same workers who were in charge, a job. The estimates were done. The contractor was given the terms and conditions. Mr. Speaker, they buy the material in every sense. They hire their workers and they pay them. Mr. Speaker, I am not going to stand there and say things were perfect afterwards. Nothing in government, not this government, not NNP, before, first NNP, second NNP, third NNP, second NDC, first NDC, no government could come in and stand in any parliament anywhere and say, I was perfect. So expect to have your share of disappointments by people that you manage. If you expect not and you will be Mr. Perfect, you will be terribly disappointed. Mr. Speaker, jobs that were estimated for 2 months sometimes took 1.5 months, Mr. Speaker. And that's the message. So that, in effect, Mr. Speaker, is transformation. You're transforming the minds of your people. Basic transformation, Mr. Speaker. But let me tell you also, Mr. Speaker, we didn't stop there. The Central Water Commission was then statutorized because government ain't paying. People wasting water. Those who have connections, not paying. So they come to do any development project. All the international agencies that came forward and asked, they want to help. Say, well, I'm not going to help if you guys refuse to make people responsible. You have to do something about the mode of operandi of the commission. And therefore, establish a Central Water Authority, as National Water and Sewage, NAWASA. Mr. Speaker, things change. I would not say it's perfect. The airport was under government. Who have connection paying, but this one, no. I was also the minister, brought the cabinet. Airport was statutorized, Mr. Speaker. They started to run their own business and became far more efficient. I will not say that they were perfect and still yet not perfect. I would never say this. So if there are difficulties, the government has a responsibility given that by the nation to correct it and move it forward. And you'll get my absolute support and compliment even in Parliament for the good things that you will do. The quarry, the gravel and concrete, man, truck disappearing with gravel. Friends, we started to rise that too and tell them you have to run their business. Again, I cannot say that what is achieved was what I would like, but it was far better than what existed before. A well-known operation, Mrs. Speaker, called the Solid Waste Authority. Mrs. Speaker, these were the people that clean the streets. Mrs. Speaker, again, you're hiring people, paying them daily paid, monthly paid, weekly paid, whatever. Garbage all over the place. So, Speaker, I remember the first Christmas that I spent up at Mount Royal. When I got out there, see, garbage, it can overflowing. You spend the whole day. When you ask, they say the men report sick. Well, of course, Christmas time, men getting sick for all kinds of reasons. So, Mr. Speaker, when we started to rise Central, the Solid Waste Authority, Mr. Speaker, and not only that, I remember also, Mr. Speaker, when Carnival came and you walked to St. George's the next morning, man, you're ashamed as a Grenadian. Man, thousands of bottles in the water and carronage, the streets littered with garbage all over the place. Mr. Speaker, when solid waste was started to rise, the next Christmas, 5 o'clock in the morning, the truck arrived and cleaned up the garbage. The carnival celebration was so, but the streets were clean. You would not believe there were carnival before. I remember the NDC government was in office at a given time. And I remember coming to town the morning after carnival, the Wednesday morning, and I saw the streets so beautiful, clean. A gentleman by the name of Finsley St. Louis was the Minister of Health. I called him and complimented him, and I went on national radio and complimented the whole government. That is what leadership is about. When someone does something good, you give him credit. He is not going to do everything good, so there will be enough to criticize him for. But for some, everything we do, you're wrong. No transformation at all. Grenada started in June 24th, 2022. No transformation. The Messiah has arrived. Papa is here. He will solve all your problems. Messiah, you are going to be terribly disappointed because the time will come, and I'm ready to start to come, that you have to face the consequences of not providing proper leadership. Mr. Speaker, I expect you and the other side could clap, because there was a lot of clap when I was on the other side and went, clap. Mr. Speaker, the devotion program now transformed into beautification. Nice words, they love a word. Big words, tie up the people. Beautification program. It was transformed from daily paid system to small contracts, Mr. Speaker. That was done, Mr. Speaker. It was done. These contracts, Mr. Speaker, now being done by people who do not hold 8 to 4 jobs. Large single-parent household seeking to support their families. They were able to complete their work in 10 days. The present government need to understand that. When you help the poor people of the country, you lose nothing. You lose nothing.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, may I just interrupt you here? I appeal to the audience to control your applause. In the House of Parliament, the applause usually comes from the table.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable,
Mr. Speaker, you know, we had a talk. He said, you're on the right platform, you're getting full support. But Mr. Speaker, last Monday, you allowed applause and applause and applause. The place went crazy.
Honorable,
Mr. Speaker, I know 2 wrongs do not make a right, but you have to be consistent.
Honorable,
Give me a chance.
Honorable,
You're all out now.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Yes.
Let me just make this point here. I am not sure what the practice has been, but when the Speaker stands, the member who is on the floor usually sits. All right? But I just want to repeat that the Speaker is responsible for managing what happens in the House. So I simply want the audience to control the applause that are coming. It's not really encouraged in the House. It should come from the table. Thank you. Honorable Leader. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, I was making the point when you interrupted there a while ago. As with fixed price contracts, Mr. Speaker, the poor people, some of them are laborers on the farm. I know a lot of them in my own constituency. Some of them are fisher folks go on the beaches to get some fish to sell for a living. Poor people. You give them a contract. They go 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. The task is done. They are able to go home. Go to the next source of opportunity. You're empowering the poor people of the land. That's what we're doing. We have a problem with them sitting, doing their work that we assign to them, giving them that work. They perform it at my satisfaction, and that's my responsibility. And they go and do something else. We have a problem with that. I remember, Mr. Speaker, an individual group making statements about, and I heard some members of this government mention it, said that they don't work enough for the money. I say this to all of them. And I was then Prime Minister. I made a statement. I said to the nation, I said, I want everybody who give them a job to perform it, and don't waste the time. But I have a problem with any one of us singling out the poor people. While we sit there and we allow a lot of people doing no work and earning thousands of dollars at the taxpayer's expense. My conscience will not allow me, Mr. Speaker, it will not allow me to criticize them. I will say, talk to them, get them to improve. But do not single them out. Talk about every bit of non-performers in the system, Mr. Speaker, because they have no major voice. So we do what we want with them. Well, Mr. Speaker, we will not. Mr. Speaker, fast forward now to the dot-com era of 1995 into 2000s, in the 2000s. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance, in his statement, attempted to marginalize the work of the ICT in the country. And talk about I was all over the world making statements about ICT, and there was no ICT. It was relegated to fixing computers. To me, Mr. Speaker, that's an insult to the workers in the ICT department. And the Prime Minister's Minister of Finance should apologize to those workers, not to me. Because I can defend myself in this House and everywhere else. Mr. Speaker, and I would outline why the statement was so incorrect, false, and dishonest in many respects. Mr. Speaker, let me tell the Minister of Finance through you, Mr. Speaker, how the ICT Department, Technology Department came into Grenada as a unit in the heads of government. Mr. Speaker, prior to 1995, when I was elected the first time, that's why I say we must know our history. Prior to 1995, the CARICOM heads of government met, and there was never a fundamental statement on science and technology, Mr. Speaker. In my first speech in Guyana in July 1995, I challenged my colleagues and I said, how could we, in this modern age, as heads of government, not seriously discussing the issue of science and technology and the role it can play in development of our countries? In fact, I made the point, if you want to improve agriculture, science is important. If you want to improve education, science is important, and all other areas tout moon, Mr. Speaker. My colleagues applauded me. And for those on the other side, Mr. Speaker, through you, go back to any newspaper throughout the entire Caribbean, and you can see the comments and accolades heaped on Grenada, not Keith Mitchell, for that statement and calling on the heads to do something. Immediately afterwards, Mr. Speaker, I was asked to take lead head of science and technology in the CARICOM region, Mr. Speaker. I was not then ICT. But later on, they gave me and said, since you have science and technology, take the other one. Mr. Speaker, through that portfolio, Grenada led the liberalization of telecommunication in the Caribbean, Mr. Speaker, which include, in the OECS first, Mr. Speaker, which include Grenada. Grenada led. I remember, Mr. Speaker, going to London in 1987. Know your history. Check the facts. And I met with the leadership of Cable and Wireless and told them you are doing a disservice to the small countries. You do not want us to grow. We started lunch. The lunch did not finish. Because who's the little guy who come talking to us? That was the mindset. Mr. Speaker, so when we started liberalization, even the trade union movement in Grenada criticized my action and said they will lose, Cable and Wireless lose a lots of jobs. I had to make the point to my brothers and sisters in the trade union movement. Because we have a respectful relationship. But we are not afraid to tell each other when we are wrong. When we perceive we are wrong. Mr. Speaker, they said jobs will be created. What happened afterwards? Liberalization. Mr. Speaker, jobs, both Cable and Wireless and Digicel. It was then I understood, by discussion having to be between both of them, I realized the whole colonial history between Ireland and Britain. I saw myself in the middle of some real hostility at the time. But Mr. Speaker, liberalization, Cable and Wireless in the discussion appointed Errol Miller from Jamaica to lead the discussion for the liberalization. Errol Miller was then the husband of Portia Simpson Miller, who was then the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, being a Caribbean man, he represented Cable and Wireless, but he stood firm that the telecommunication must be liberalized. Because it is a well-known fact in every country. There is a tremendous correlation between telecommunication development and the gross domestic product in any country. Mr. Speaker, because Errol Miller was appearing to be concerned about the region, he was summarily moved, Mr. Speaker, as leader of Cable and Wireless discussion. But liberalization continued. We got it. Jamaica and a number of Caribbean countries came to the table with those institutions after we led the liberalization. To you, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance must know his history. So when he opens his mouth, he must know what he is saying. And especially when I'm still alive and I'm still especially in this parliament. Because I know the history. None on the other side know it as I do. And that's not a boast, just a fact. Mr. Speaker, because of the strides we took, Mr. Speaker, because of that stride, I was named, and not me, Keith Nutchell, just the country and what it was doing, as a member of the head of the World Statistical Body, an honor which I still hold. I still call about meetings and issues about stuff. And these are statisticians from all over the world, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's our history. Mr. Speaker, the infrastructure of telecommunication was helped with electricity poles already in place and funded by Grenada's workers at Grenlec. Mr. Speaker, it's their hard work and sweat, not some foreign body. Mr. Speaker, the development of electricity and telecommunication sectors was therefore a serious prerequisite for the digital transformation initiatives that follow through projects. CARSIP, Mr. Speaker. E-services, Mr. Speaker, I understand we have nothing, we do nothing at all. The Digital Governance and Resilience Project, DG4R, funded by the World Bank, Mr. Speaker, know your history. This project was initiated by Grenada with the World Bank, a team of persons in the World Bank who led that department. It turns out to be, Mr. Speaker, project. We led it, that DG4 project. Mr. Speaker, did not go as fast as some of us would want, because some countries will move faster than we are, but the fact is, Grenada led it, and a number of key initiatives took place. It is unfortunate, therefore, that the Minister of Finance and Prime Minister chose to mention a mysterious, nameless staff who indicated that ITC department was merely for fixing computers, when the same projects that are existing in the budget, under ITC, are the same projects that were in the budget in 2022. Read your document. But we did nothing. But that's the same project is in the budget today, moving forward. And I'm happy it's been done. Not a single project, Mr. Speaker, was added. So I encourage the Minister of Finance and Prime Minister, through you, Mr. Speaker, to consult page 294 of the estimates and fast check what he claims he was told. Mr. Speaker, prior to this government assuming office, the people of Grenada, many persons, paid taxes licenses, COVID tests, and the like online through e-services initiated by the new National Party's administration. The CARSIP project, which was led by Grenada through my efforts, Mr. Speaker, as lead on information, was designed to support a high-capacity connection, particularly in critical government buildings, and to deliver improved internet service to schools and community centers in Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Mr. Speaker, Grenada led a discussion and negotiated, Mr. Speaker, know your history. We negotiated at Grenada led that a reduction in roaming rates for citizens of the entire Caribbean, Mr. Speaker. We led it, Mr. Speaker, but we did nothing. ITC didn't exist. Know your history. Grenada signed the declaration on behalf of CARICOM in St. George's. I wonder where the Minister of Finance and Prime Minister was at the time. Mr. Speaker, that declaration facilitated the provision of seamless mobile cellular services, including voice, SMS, text, and data. CARICOM residents are now allowed to roam in the Caribbean states at a significantly reduced cost with up to 70% savings. Grenada led this, Mr. Speaker. But we did nothing. Mr. Speaker, the resuscitation of existing projects while claiming nothing was done, in my view, is intellectually dishonest at best. But I am not surprised and get used to the Minister of Finance making statements that will make people look bad, that turns out to be inaccurate. I will point out some later. The Digital Governance Project is a project initiated to build a smart, resilient government that adopts a whole-of-government approach to the implementation of critical public policies and services by fortifying the core institutional functions, processes, and information systems that constitute the backbone for the development of e-government services to all our citizens. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance and Prime Minister spoke about this project on page 34 to 35. And for a second, Mr. Speaker, I thought that he copied what we said in my budget presentation in 2019. And I didn't say he copied, I said I thought. The funds for this project were already obtained through the World Bank, through the NNP administration. A provider for the new tax system for the Inland Revenue was already identified. In fact, they're down here now. And a firm that will oversee the implementation of the various components of the project was procured. Mr. Speaker, not a single credit by our Prime Minister and Minister of Finance was given. It would have been so good for him, not for me, not for us, to admit this and say we're taking it to the next stage. But if he says this, it's not in his DNA appear so. It's like giving credit, and he can't give credit to anybody but himself, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker, NNP administration did not only lay the foundation for economic development, but also for the transformation of the digital economy in the true sense of the word, and not as being bandied about by the NDC administration, the now NDC administration. Renaming existing programs with the use of the word transformation and claiming that all of a sudden they have transformed the whole of Grenada is a grave fallacy. My tenure of service in Grenada, and by extension, the regional ITC space, was well recorded. No one can do anything to that. The record is there. Trying to erase it would only make those who do it try to do it small. I have reached the mountaintop. I have no more way to go. Mr. Speaker, I've reached it, Mr. Speaker. I have nowhere to go. But I'm there to help. And to help my young brothers and sisters, if they so wish, on any side of the house. The father of the house have a responsibility, not just to be partisan, but to help. And this, I'm prepared to do. But there must be, is it one hand can clap? Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the funds for the project was obtained through our government, as I pointed out, provided for the new tax system for inland revenue, and so on, and oversee the implementation of all various components of that project. The provision of tablets and e-books and devices in the schools was also through the efforts of the work of the new National Party in government. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the NNP administration did not only lay the foundation for economic development, but also for the transformation of the digital economy in the true sense of the word, not as being bandied about. Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, it's important that the regional work, my colleagues in the region gives me praise and Grenada praise for the work that it has done. I have been asked, and still been asked, only recently, to address universities in the state and the role of technology in development. In fact, in 2020, I was asked by MIT Engineering Department to present a paper, which a half-day discussion to the students at MIT, Mr. Speaker. That's not a boast. I'm saying this because it seemed to be an attempt to erase the work that was done, and we won't let them do it. Mr. Speaker, I'm yet to see an ITC project, or any project for that matter, that was the original idea of this government. Mr. Speaker, the usual roads, buildings, infrastructure was a major part of the foundation. The transportation, the health, the education, agriculture, construction, other sectors continue to benefit from these infrastructural investments.